As the months go by in the Obama presidential reign, I've been choking on one inexplicable headline after another, none of which make any sense to me. Why would our elected leader intentionally defy our laws and the Constitution to wreak havoc on our citizens and the U.S. economy? In 2008, America elected Barack Obama for some hope and change that would lift us out of a severe recession. The Federal Reserve began printing money to artificially prop up the stock market, and Obama launched uncontrolled spending with his stimulus plan. 8 years later, we're mired in debt, our culture is failing, our national security is in peril, and we have rioting in our streets and on the campuses. We assumed the POTUS, this is an acronym for President of the United States, was on our side, ready to do battle against the forces, both external and internal, that would do our nation harm. Instead, he became self-absorbed with a personal ideological agenda of racism, immigration, environment, and a government takeover. It's hard to blame this on simple liberal political activism. Oblivious to the terrorist threat, our economic collapse, and 100 other very real problems, the president fundraises, plays golf, or brainwashes you about global warming. This is a disconnection from reality. Ask yourself if any of the following actions seem normal to you. We open the borders, encourage illegal immigration by offering generous benefits, and protect criminal illegals in sanctuary cities where they murder Americans. We welcome refugees from a terrorist country just after ISIS Syrians murdered 160 Parisians. Obama and the government confiscate 1/6 of our economy, its healthcare, mandate premium payments, and enforce it with the IRS, all knowing full well that the government screws up everything it touches. Social Security, Medicare, the federal budget, Veterans Administration, and so on. Openly incite racism and racial distrust by telling people of color that it's my fault because of something called white privilege. Ramp up rioting in the streets by declaring an open season on cops. And then call in Al Sharpton as your advisor. And then there's the Iran agreement. Talk about crazy. Let's give a religious fanatic an atomic bomb and $150 billion to supply terrorists, all while this jihadist vows to wipe us off the face of the earth. Does that make any sense to you? The morning of the France attack, the president was asked about ISIS. "We've got them contained," he said. Then 2 days later, in a press conference, was questioned about the success of his strategy. He said, "We have no strategy, and we're going to keep doing what we've been doing, just more of it." Isn't that the very definition of insanity? Expecting a different outcome after continuous failure? Our POTUS is acting strangely irrational as he obsessively pursues his personal goals, mostly in defiance of the people he serves, while ignoring other serious problems. A pattern is emerging. He's clearly motivated, but by what? The key to understanding Obama's behavior lies with observations made by many smart observers. His arrogant, self-obsessive, self-important actions point to a mental condition called narcissism. Let's see if we can confirm this. With your first encounter with Barack Obama, you're struck by his confident, even grandiose style. Even though the rhetoric is empty, he's capable of attracting a cult-like following. His air of haughtiness is unsettling. His posture and his body language seem louder than his empty words. Dr. Sam Vaknin believes these are signs of narcissism, or narcissistic personality disorder, or NPD. Childhood events play a part in mental development. A determining factor in the development of NPD is childhood abuse. Obama's early life was decidedly chaotic and replete with traumatic and mentally bruising dislocations. Mixed-race marriages were uncommon back then, and his parents divorced when he was just 2 years old. His father disappeared and his mother remarried, and they moved to Indonesia in a foreign culture, where he was raised by his stepfather. At the age of 10, he was sent off to his, dare I say, white grandparents. He rarely ever saw his mother, and she died of cancer in 1995. Perhaps this explains his need for the attention he seems to crave. Narcissists are self-centered, self-absorbed, controlling, selfish, and arrogant. They lack empathy and are often liars. Sound like anyone you know? Narcissists have no interest in things that do not help them to reach their personal objectives. They are focused on one thing alone, and that's power. All other issues are meaningless to them, and they do not want to waste their precious time on trivialities. Anything that does not help them is beneath them and does not deserve their attention. During his term in the Senate, Obama chose to vote present 130 times so as not to be bothered by issues that didn't concern him. As a young senator, he was paid a big chunk of money to write a book on race relations, but he chose instead to write his autobiography. By age 45, he had written 2 autobiographies before accomplishing anything. By the way, Joseph Stalin and Adolf Hitler also wrote autobiographies as young men. Both were manic narcissists. In Barack's inaugural address, he referred to himself 144 times. Many politicians are narcissists. In fact, it might be a prerequisite for the job. They pose no threat to others. They are simply self-serving and selfish. Obama evidences symptoms of pathological narcissism, which is different from the run-of-the-mill narcissism of a Richard Nixon or a Bill Clinton, for example. Bill's focus is clearly on himself, for personal pleasure and wealth. He has no delusions about power and control. He just prefers the cash. To Obama, reality and fantasy are intertwined. This is a mental health issue, not just a character flaw. And now for a disclaimer. Narcissistic personality disorder is classified as just that, a personality disorder. A psychosis is defined by loss of contact with reality. Experts say that even the wackiest narcissists do not lose contact with reality enough to call it a psychosis. In fact, narcissism cannot be used as a legal defense for insanity. Regardless, I hereby elevate the president to a higher level of detachment, qualifying him for consideration as a genuine psychotic. Here's how it happens. They say that psychotic pyromaniacs, kleptomaniacs, or sex maniacs experience some kind of addictive rush or high when setting a fire, stealing, or raping. It's known that narcissism evokes an addictive-like drive for power and control. There is a known chemical link to psychotic behavior. That chemical is called dopamine. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter produced in normal amounts in normal brains at these locations. Certain chemicals like methamphetamine, cocaine, and nicotine, or the activities associated with personality disorders, can trigger the release of abnormal amounts of dopamine that follow pathways to these locations in the brain. Neurons in these locations are responsible for addiction, compulsion, and reward motivation. The president's acquisition of power and control stimulates elevated levels of dopamine release that flow to receptive neurons, creating the addictive response. Could this be why our patient cares more about climate control than combating terrorism? Now let's explore how Obama's narcissism and his drive for power can harm my grandchildren's future. The key to a power grab is spending. The more the better. Climate change will confiscate over $2 trillion. Cost is no object, nor does it matter that we're broke and we borrow 40 cents on every dollar we spend. Here's the stupid part. We borrow this money from China, who is exempt from the agreement, while they build 1,200 new coal-burning power plants spewing carbon. While we destroy our economy with Obama Green, China buries us economically. Next, Obama has to sell it. Global warming is a massive hoax. I researched it extensively, and excellent references are provided. Additionally, the EPA states that the $2 trillion will only buy us a cooling of 0.2 of a degree Celsius. What a deal! Something this unbelievable requires the consummate narcissist to convince everyone to buy it. Narcissists are liars and lie about the threat to the planet and provide bogus data to prove it. Obama co-opts his cult-like media following to mindlessly sell it. If all this sounds like delusional narcissism, it is. My friend Gordon sent me a note that illustrates how folks are recognizing the delusion. As Obama gains more delusional merit badges, he qualifies for a genuine psychosis. Finally, the delusion requires strong-arm enforcement. He sidesteps Congress with executive orders for unlimited spending. He uses the EPA to bankrupt carbon producers with regulations. Discredit reputable science by identification as evil deniers. Deniers are ridiculed, sued, and ostracized from the scientific community. Dole out $80 million for climate research, but only grant funds to organizations promising to support your cause. Use the court system as an attack dog. Example, in New Jersey this week, the prosecuting attorney sued ExxonMobil for lying to the public about the dangers of global warming. Even though global warming is not proven, it will require the energy companies to spend vast sums for their defense. All this is ideological fascist behavior, where dissenting opinion is not accepted, and reminds us of a dangerous time in history. By now you can understand how the Saul Alinsky approach to socialism and the Obama takeover and its attendant ideological fascism works perfectly for a power and control addicted narcissist like Obama. I'll leave you with one final example of the POTUS psychosis, but promise not to laugh. This is deadly serious. Did it ever occur to you that the leader of the most important country in the world finds time to play a lot of golf? How about 250 rounds as of this August? It seems his addictive narcissist personality extends to his favorite pastime. The press interviewed him on that horrific day when American journalist Steven Sotloff was beheaded. He couldn't be bothered by something so trivial and blew off the press. He was on the first tee less than a half an hour later. Remember that the trait of NPD patients is an addiction to an activity with a total exclusion of any other issues. This is another pathologic detachment from reality. If it's not on his list of priorities, he could care less. I'll leave it to you to decide how chasing a little ball around and getting it to fall in a hole constitutes a quest for power and control. Unfortunately, this is not very funny when you remember that while Obama gets his dopamine fix, ISIS terrorists are slaughtering innocent people, our economic and national security grows weak, and our freedoms fade. The good news is that when Hillary lies to you in the next presidency, they won't be the delusional lies of a psychopath.